Good evening and welcome to the Monday night edition of the People Show with Mark Wallace. And Charles Thomas is usually with me, but he is off tonight. He'll be back with us on next week. So you will be just here with me, but we have some great guests coming up with you tonight. As I told you, going forward, we are going to be not only on our regularly scheduled program on Monday nights, where Charles and I, are here on Intellectual Radio, YouTube, as well as Instagram and X, formerly known as Twitter, and of course on all of my Facebook page outlets. You can catch the program streaming live there. And also, we are just deliciously proud as um, the late, great Matt King Carter, who was my Christian education instructor for many years at the National Baptist Congress, who was passed on some years ago. A great intellect and a brilliant pastor down in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. But at any rate, so we're going to be doing throughout this election cycle, of course, the primaries here are March 19. And so there are a number of critical seats here locally that are important. And you will be hearing from a number of the candidates, a number of the judges that are running for seats. There are some 45 vacancies, and there are 69 candidates running for those 45 vacancies. We're going to provide you with information you can go to understand more and get more information about the judges and who they are and what their records are and what their reviews are, so that you could make informed choices when you go into the ballot box to make your choices for the judicial circuit. And also, coming up a little bit later on the program, we're going to be talking with the attorney who is actually representing the bus companies, El Paso United Charters versus the city of Chicago. That attorney is going to be on with us a little bit later on in the program, and he's going to be talking about that case and giving us what his thoughts are and his views are from a legal basis. So we're going to be talking about that a little bit later on. And of course, we're going to be talking about a lot of the news of the day and of, some Trump stuff that has been going on, some crazy things that he has been saying, which is nothing new, but we're going to be talking about that a little bit later on, and giving you some information on that news, some local news, as well as some international news, a little update on what's happening out in Ukraine, and of course, what's going on in Israel. But joining me now on the program, who is with us right now, is the sitting circuit Cook County Judge Leonard Murray, who is also a candidate for the appellate court, and he's joining us now on the program, and we're going to be talking with him about his race that he is in, running as the appellate court. But we're going to start out first introducing him. Judge Leonard Murray, welcome to the program.
Good evening, Mark, and thank you so much for inviting me to be on with your listeners, and also to discuss the importance of the upcoming judicial elections in Cook County, the primary elections, that is.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let's just start out, Judge, with talking about what it is now. You're in the circuit court Cook County judge, and you handle all kind of cases. So just give the viewers some background as to what it is that you're doing currently now, the seat that you're in the circuit court.
Sure. I am a circuit court judge, currently the supervising judge in what's called housing court. it's a bit of a misnomer because what we deal with every day in my division, and there's 6 judges in my division, 5 others who sort of report to me. We handle all matters related to health and safety as respects the building codes in the city of Chicago. And we also have a part of Cook County that's unincorporated as well. That's a one book of business that we have as well. And also, we sit as a reviewing body for cases from the administrative hearing section of the city of Chicago. Uh, that work is called administrative review. So the city code of Chicago has thousands of possible violations for uh, transgressions against the code that exist. And the city can cite you. You can be fined under that code. But you have a right to be heard in a due process mode. If you disagree with your outcome there, under Illinois law, you have a right to seek what is referred to as administrative review. It's similar to an appeal, uh, it, which is the court that I'm seeking to be elected to next month. In that we review what's occurred below, meaning at the administrative hearing level, and we decide whether or not the record that is provided to us on administrative review supports the outcome there. If it does not, then there are a number of remedies that we have available to assist the petitioning person on administrative review, including reversal. We can modify the ruling or somehow alter it to fit what the facts seem to support. So I've been in this position now for amazing to me 7.5 years. Um, it's very important. It's a vital part of the court. In fact, I believe it's the most important part of the court that is unrecognized. Uh, and just to give you a couple quick examples of why it's important, one of the first cases that I presided over once I got to the division in October of 2016 is that there was a fire in a single family residence and 6 kids were killed, primarily due to smoke inhalation. And the fire investigation discovered that there was not a working smoke detector in this home. And as hopefully the viewers know, uh, the City of Chicago Fire Department will give you a free smoke detector for your home, including the battery to operate it. All you have to do is go by and ask for it. However, this particular residence did not have a working smoke detector, and unfortunately, all the children who were present in that home at that time passed away. Another example I'll give you quickly is there was a Six Flag building on the south side of Chicago, and the building owner was doing some maintenance. And Mark, I think for some reason, I think half of my video is not being um, seen.
Well, we can see you here.
Okay, all right. Um, and in the course of doing some maintenance, he was replacing a waste line or sewer line uh, connected to the property, and the company that he hired uh, unfortunately nicked the fresh water line to the building in the course of these repairs. So what that meant is that Six Flag building was without fresh water because of this nick in the fresh water line. So the city brought a case in court to try to resolve this. I ordered that the building owner supply each unit in the building with 5 gallons. I'm sorry, five-gallon jugs of fresh water uh, as a stable inventory every day. They have to make sure that there are at least five gallon uh, jugs of water available every day for health and safety reasons. And particularly, it was of particular importance to one of the uh, occupants in the building who lived with his parents, and he existed based on a main line. A main line, as your viewers may well know, is a feeding tube. And in order for that means of nutrition, it must be kept very, very sanitary. And without fresh water and the ability to heat water, since we could not have access to hot water naturally until a repair was made, I had to make sure that his parents were able to care for him by having fresh water. And I ordered that the property manager in that situation supplied each unit with at least 25 gallons of fresh water on a daily basis. That's a constant inventory level that I ordered that they provide. Uh, Fortunately, the repair was made fairly quickly. I would say in less than a week. And interestingly enough, once the repair was made and they reported that to me in court, the city of Chicago told me that they could not go out and test the purity of the water at the tap in the building uh, for another week. And I said to them, "No way! You going out tomorrow and make sure and test that water supply to make sure that what's coming out of the tap is in fact fresh and sanitary." And in fact, of course, they followed the judge's order. So we were able to restore fresh water to the six-flat building on the south side with this young man who I mentioned exists based on the feeding tube within about a week, which I thought was a rapid response to the situation. And also, it wasn't a situation where we had a landlord who was neglectful. It's just that the folks that he hired to replace the sewer line, unfortunately, weren't quite as careful as they should have been, and they nicked the fresh water line, and that could have caused a contamination to any fresh water that was drawn at the tap. So that's an example of what we do in my division. And also tell my friends my corny joke this, and that is when you're in your bedroom at night, uh, the reason that your ceiling does not fall in on you is because of the building codes. That your structure, fortunately, has been crafted and made sufficient to protect you and others from your ceiling falling in. And that's all a function of the building codes, which are really vital for health and safety throughout the city of Chicago and, in fact, throughout the world.
So, as the supervising judge, so you're responsible for all real estate concerns, health and safety throughout the entire county, not just the city of Chicago.
Yes, we do from time to time get called in for matters outside the city, but as you know, Mark, Illinois is a home rule state,
Mhm.
so therefore all the various political divisions of the state, like the various cities and towns, have a right to create their own safety standards internally that are not otherwise controlled by state law. And they also have a right to create their own systems of hearing matters where there's alleged violation of a city code. For the most part, they have adopted these hearing tribunals of their own, administrative hearing systems of their own. But there are some instances where we get called in to preside over situations where there is a dispute within those towns and villages and cities.
So there is another case that is important, and obviously we can't talk about the details of that. But there is another case that you're also handling that's a part of what you mentioned earlier, which was the administrative review, and I mentioned that in the opening of the program that the case that the city of Chicago is involved in with the transporting of the migrants from Texas to Illinois and to Chicago, there's now a case that the city has brought against, I think it's 38 companies, about 95 different cases that they have brought. You're handling that case. We can't talk about the case itself, but that is a case that you're handling, and that's a part of your division.
It is. In fact, it's 95 cases, individual cases that have been brought, and the allegations, which are public, anybody can go on the clerk of the circuit court's website and look at the complaint if they like. Um, But essentially, there's a city ordinance that requires that the migrant bus companies give notice to the city of an intent to drop off um, those that they have ferried from Texas, I believe, primarily, and dropped them off within the city limits. And there's similar ordinances around Chicago as well. Oak Lawn has such an ordinance, and there are other collar cities and towns around the city of Chicago that have a similar ordinance. But in any event, if there's a violation, it is possible to be fined, and a range of fines. And this is also public information, and you can go to the city's um, uh, municipal code and find it. It's from 2,000 on the low end to 10,000 on the maximum end. Um, so there are actually 95 cases. So in theory, at least, and they're different defendants in the case. And also, this was not brought as a case on administrative review. The city had actually sued these various bus companies in an original action, not on administrative review for violation of the city code. Similarly, that they do for building owners and other homeowners. If they believe there's a violation that exists, they can sue as an original action and not go through the administrative hearing section that exists.
So, and of course, the defendants are challenging the constitutionality of the ordinance with the city. So they're challenging that at the federal level, and once that is determined or decided at the federal level, then the case will resume at the state level.
Well, that's not well. Certainly, the federal case is proceeding down the street in the Dirksen building. Um, but what's going to happen with the 95 cases that are now before me is it still an open question. Um, uh, you were present today during the call this afternoon, and the lawyer who's representing those 95 defendants or 38 different companies has filed a motion seeking to stay the state court proceedings, the ones before me, until such time as the federal court has decided whether or not the city ordinance that has been cited against the 38 individual bus companies, resulting in 95 cases, is constitutional. So I cannot tell you at this point what the outcome of that motion will be. I think it's set for hearing. I want to say in April. But in any event, we'll look at the allegations in their motion, review what the law is, and decide whether or not there is a legal basis to stay these proceedings until such time as the federal case has been resolved.
Okay, got it. And we're going to be talking with coming up later on in the second half hour. We're going to be talking with the attorney who is representing those defendants in those 95 cases, and they're going to be giving us their take on it. So let's get to your candidacy. So you're running for the appellate court. Now, what district and what seat are you running for at the appellate court? Because there's 24 appellate court justices on the circuit, right?
There are 24 in what's called the first district appellate court. Of the 24, 18 are elected spots, and then there are 6 positions that the Supreme Court has elected to assign judges who are circuit judges to assist in the business of the court. So those 6 are not elected to the appellate court. They've been assigned there. But what's unusual about this cycle, at least in my experience, is that there are 4 seats up for election on the Illinois Appellate Court, First District, which I believe is the highest number that I can recall in my years as a lawyer and judge in Cook County. So that's rather unusual that there are that many vacancies that occur at the same time. The particular vacancy that I am seeking to fill is, in fact, Judge Matt Delort, who was sworn in on the same day that I was as an associate judge. So Matt and I were sworn in April of 2007, and we have a history of having done some election cases together. In fact, we represented Larry Rogers with another lawyer who's now we've lost, Rich Means, and we also represented Joy Cunningham when she won the appellate seat that she left or vacated last December when Justice Ann Burke retired. So we have that history as well. But Matt's seat, along with three other seats, are open and available for election in the primary that will occur on March 19th of this year. Uh, and so because of that, that the fact of the four vacancies and uh, the unique opportunity that exists in ambition. I think all of us should be ambitious. I decided to make a go for it. Um, we were there was an attempt to not let me and a slate mate of mine go forward with our goal of at least running for the office because they challenged our petitions, and it really kept us tied up until about 2 weeks ago or so, until we finally knew for sure um, that we were going to make the ballot. The At the electoral level, the Cook County Board of Election ruled us off, and then we went to circuit court, and a trial level judge ruled us back on, and then the original objectors against us filed for an appeal of the trial court judge's ruling, and ultimately uh, that trial court judge's ruling was affirmed. It was, that was interesting as well because uh, in the ordinary circumstance, the trial court ruling from the Cook County Circuit Court would have been appealed to a panel of judges from the first district. However, because we are running against some candidates, I suppose, and I don't know this for sure, but this is my pure speculation, we are running against some members of the court um, in this quest. So I don't know if there was some concern about the appearance of how that would look if members of the court would be presiding over matters that pertain to their colleague. Um, but in any event, there were members of the third district appellate court who were assigned to the first district appellate court to hear the appeal. So it was actually three judges from the third district, which is roughly the area um, that begins in uh, the southwest corner of the northwest corner of the state, and then finds its way down towards the center of the state. But they were brought in to preside over the appeal, and in less than 2 weeks, the appeal was decided, and it was decided favorable to us in that the appellants lost that appeal, and it was suggested that they would not pursue additional review in the Illinois Supreme Court. So we were very
So
happy with that, but
yeah,
it just delayed us really getting full steam ahead in terms of our candidacy and our attempt to run for this office.
right. And you're a Democrat. I'm a Democrat. You're running as a Democrat, but you're running independently of the Democratic Party because you were not slated by the Democratic Party, and you decided to run, and you're running independently of that. So you're not a slated candidate. Not that I think that there was any advantage to that. And there are times, or certainly there are accusations, um, and many people believe that that the party, the Democratic Party here in Cook County in Illinois, try to um, run the elections or the slates with somewhat of an iron fist. So it somewhat contradicts what is supposed to be the democratic process. So, yes, you could have your party slated candidates. Okay, fine. But I don't think that they should be preventing anybody else from participating in the democratic process, and then, saying that you're an advocate for democracy.
Well, it's interesting because this last year's slating process was the second time that I attempted to be slated for an appellate court position. I also attempted to be slated in 2015, and at that time there were two vacancies. They slated Bertina Lampkin, who was sitting on the court at the time, and they also slated Eileen O'Neill Burke, who is now a candidate for state's attorney in Cook County. She retired from the court last July to run for state's attorney. But that cycle, I was picked as an alternate, such as I was this cycle, but I was picked at the second alternate that cycle. Curiously enough, this cycle, I get picked as a fourth alternate. So I'm not moving up, I'm moving down.
Right.
And there were four vacancies, as I've mentioned. Highly unusual to have that many vacancies in an elected round for appellate court.
Now, were those vacancies because of people retiring at the same time?
They didn't retire at the same time, but they retired in a system or in an order that all of their seats would be on the ballot in this primary.
Wow. Okay.
The first retiree was, I think Maureen Connors, and then Joy Cunningham's seat became available because she moved up to the Supreme Court. Then Eileen O'Neill Burke's seat became available because she retired last July to run for state's attorney. And then Matt Delort's seat became available in either late August or September because he retired. And that is, in fact, the seat that I'm seeking. And I mentioned he was we became judges at the same time, though there was a vacancy that occurred a few years after he became an associate, and he was successful in that effort. But that's the vacancy that I petitioned to run for, and the one that I'm seeking to fill next month. But one thing I want to mention to your viewers that they really have to be mindful of and really astute about, and that is, I was at a candidates forum last Saturday, a week ago Saturday, at New Faith Church out in Matson, I believe. And after the event, it was a fairly decent turnout of interested voters and citizens. And one person there came to me and said, "Your name is not on this ballot." And I took a look at what he had. I said, "Well, that's not a ballot. It's not, and certainly not an official ballot. What it was the party's mailer to indicate who they believe the individual should vote for in the primary election, and they only list those candidates that were slated. Of course, I was not slated, so therefore my name did not appear. So we've got to be careful in making sure that folks understand that party mailer is not the official ballot. It does not contain all of the names of everyone who has been deemed eligible to have their names appear on the ballot. My punch number is 135. It does not appear on the party's mailer because I'm not their slated candidate. In fact, of the four vacancies on the appellate court this time, there are two that are unopposed. So they will win by virtually just voting for themselves because they're not opposed. There are two vacancies that are opposed, and I have my opponent is the slated candidate by the Democratic Party, um, but the piece that the party is circulating should not be used to suggest that those are the only names that will be appearing on the official ballot that you will see in your precinct or voting place on March 19th.
All right, fantastic. Circuit Court Judge Leonard Murray running for the appellate court. Your punch number is again
135, and
135.
my slogan is "Don't be in a hurry, vote for Murray."
All right, fantastic. Judge Murray, thank you very much for coming on and talking with us. We are also going to be doing, well, I want to talk about this just before we go. We're also going to be doing a legal hour with Judge Murray coming up starting this Saturday at 1 o'clock. So he'll be able to answer your questions about the processes of the court and that sort of thing. He can't give you advice, but he certainly can answer legal questions as it relates to the court and the process is there. So we're going to be talking about that every Saturday at 1 o'clock. So the legal hour with Judge Leonard Murray right here with me, Mark Wallace, on the People Show starting this Saturday. Make sure that you tune in for that. Share that information with your friends, and Judge Murray will be joining me this Saturday. Thanks so much, Judge Murray. We appreciate you being here.
Yeah, thank you, Mark, for having me on.
All right, we'll talk to you soon. All right, and joining me now on the program, as I told you earlier, that we were going to be bringing on the attorney who is handling the case that the city has brought forth. It is the the City of Chicago Municipal Corporation, which is the plaintiff, versus El Paso United Charters, LLC. And the attorney joining me now who is handling that case is attorney Michael Kozlowski, who is the attorney handling that case. Attorney, welcome to the program, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Mark. Happy to be here.
All right. Okay. First and foremost, you're an attorney, and the obvious question that people would ask is, why in the world would you put yourself in the middle of such a heated, controversial situation?
There's no better place to be, Mark. If every case were easy and uncontroversial, we wouldn't have too many lawsuits. The high-profile nature of the case, the controversy associated with it, comes with the territory for sure. But at the end of the day, I've got a client, and in this case, we've got many clients, dozens of clients that are all being affected by the city's ordinance in the same or in a similar way, and so we're happy to help.
Now, you're representing, I believe there are 38 defendants, 95 cases. Is that correct?
So you broke up there for a second for me. So the city has filed, I believe it's 95. It's either 95 or 94 cases through the end of last year for a violation of this new bus ordinance. And in total, there's probably 25 or so different companies that have been named. Some companies have been sued more than once.
Mm-hmm. And you're representing everybody.
That's correct.
Okay. Which is, well, I guess it's a large pool of defendants, but it's the same charges for everybody that the city is charging or alleging.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. It's the same ordinance. The specific facts are a little different, right? This entity dropped people off at this time. They operated this kind of bus in this place, but overall, they're the same general nature of cases, and it's fairly common when you have litigation like this that is similar issues over and over again to have the same lawyer handle all of them.
Okay, and what are the allegations that the city is charging? What is, or that they're alleging?
Sure. So the city's complaint is about 2 pages long, and what it says is that insert defendants, El Paso United Charters or Jecativo or any of these number of bus companies, that the bus companies violated a particular section of the Chicago Municipal Code by dropping folks off in Chicago without first obtaining written permission from the commissioner of the Chicago Department of Transportation.
And your challenge to that is, now I know that you have a case that are you the one who's challenging the constitutionality of that at the federal level?
That's right. So we're working with the law firm on that. So that case is brought by a company called Wynn Transportation. They are not a named defendant in the state court cases, but Wynn Transportation is bringing a federal claim, and both myself and my law firm and another law firm, Andrews Myers, are representing Wynn in that federal case. And there's also there's another case pending in New York as well that's also similar.
So, so the city, doesn't the city have the right, because we are a home rule state, doesn't the city have the right to self-governance?
No doubt. The city absolutely has the right, and some would even say the obligation, to pass laws to protect its citizens. It's a lawful exercise of the police power. There's no question about that. The key word there, though, is lawful. The city can only do what the Constitution allows. Put another way, the city can't, under a home rule authority, violate the constitutional rights of you, me, or anybody. And that's what they're doing with this ordinance. And so the ordinance itself is unconstitutional, which is the basis for the federal case, and therefore unenforceable.
What makes it unconstitutional?
Yeah,
unlawful.
Yeah, so there's several bases that make it unconstitutional. I think the most important one is that it violates something called the Interstate Commerce Clause. And the reason it does that is because it exempts. The ordinance has all these restrictions, and you have to get approval from the commissioner before you can even operate a bus company. Now, the city will say, oh, you only need to get approval in order to drop people off. But that's what operating a bus company is picking up people and dropping people off. And so there's a whole slew of bus companies that don't need to get this type of approval, that are primarily located in basically the Chicago metropolitan area. It's a little bit broader than that. It includes portions of southeast Wisconsin and northwest Indiana. But those bus companies don't have to comply. It's only the faraway bus companies that have to comply. Bus companies from out of state, bus companies from downstate. And when a law discriminates, which is what the case law will say, that's discrimination, not in the sort of historical sense that we think of it, but when a law treats similarly situated entities, i.e. bus companies, differently, it has to pass certain levels of scrutiny. And in this case, the ordinance does not do that because there's no reasonable basis for the city to say, these bus companies from out of state have to do one thing, and these other bus companies in state have to do a different thing. I mean, at the end of the day, they're all bus companies.
But the city would say that there is now a common practice that is happening within the city, and it is impacting the citizens of the city and the residents of the city with this common practice with these bus companies that are transporting people from Texas that are asylum seekers, and they're bringing thousands of people, numerous of buses every day. And so doesn't the city have the responsibility to make sure that not stopping it from happening, but certainly monitoring how it happens? Don't they have the responsibility and the right to do that?
So I don't know exactly what the city's rights and responsibilities would be in that exact scenario. I mean, that's something best left up to the city and the mayor's office and the people of the city to decide through the legislative process. What I can tell you about this particular situation is the way in which the city has chosen to regulate, the way in which the city has chosen to monitor the situation. As you say, it does not pass constitutional muster. It's not reasonably related to any sort of legitimate public purpose in this case. If the city wanted to, if the city was truly interested in that, it would make it much easier to for these bus companies to operate. It would make it much easier to drop folks off, and we would have centers and shelters and more of the things that I think a lot of folks and a lot of your listeners probably are thinking of. But that gets into the second constitutional issue, which is you're right. You know it. I know it. Everybody that reads the papers knows it. This ordinance relates to immigration. We would not have this ordinance but for what has been called the migrant crisis. And so this is really the city making its own immigration policy. Make no mistake, this doesn't have anything to do with people coming from Duluth, Minnesota, or Des Plaines, Iowa, or Chattanooga, Tennessee. This has to do with asylum seekers coming into the United States and then wanting to come to places like Chicago, like New York, getting on a bus and coming here. And so when we're talking about that context, we're talking about immigration. That's a federal issue. The city lacks authority to legislate on a federal issue like immigration. And that is another basis why the ordinance is unconstitutional.
Yes, it's a federal issue, but there are those who would say that the city has a responsibility. People are being transported into the city, so the city does have a responsibility to intervene and to manage this situation. And the city can set parameters or asking the bus companies to operate, to not bring them, but to operate within a certain standard. Doesn't the city have the right and responsibility to do that?
So again, I'll leave up to the city what it thinks its rights and responsibilities are. But the question of, do they legally have the ability to do it? Categorically, that answer is yes. Again, if we're not talking about immigration, right? To the extent this is an immigration related issue, that's a federal issue, fully federal, the city can't touch it. But let's just talk about regular travel, right? People coming maybe not from outside of the country or not from the state of Texas. Categorically, can the city do that? Well, sure, the city can regulate, but it's the way, the devil's in the details. It's the way in which the regulation happens. For example, people, at least pre-COVID, used to commute to downtown for work every day. 1 million people, that's not an exaggeration, would commute in. They could do so freely. They didn't need the permission of City Hall to drive their car and park it and then go to work. And so it's the way, just imagine a scenario where you needed permission before you could travel to the city of Chicago, or you could travel outside of the city of Chicago. It's that type of regulation. That's what violates the Constitution. We're not saying that the city doesn't have police power. Of course they do.
So shouldn't there, because it sounds as though, anybody can just decide that they can load up thousands of people, and that the city would have to be responsible for housing these people. This is slightly different than someone who is deciding to come to the city of Chicago, rent
sure
living spaces and that sort of thing. But you have a governor who has decided that this would be a place to drop off people. And some people would argue that people want to come here, but some people would also argue that there has been allegations or that people were misled to come to certain places because they were given promises that certain things would be available to them. So this is different than someone who is traveling to come and they have the wherewithal to provide for themselves and to buy hotels and rent rooms and that sort of thing. This is very different from that. And the city is simply saying, in their argument, they're saying, we don't mind you doing it, but we are setting a parameter and asking for you, bus companies, to comply with the parameters that we've set forth. What's not lawful about that?
So what's not lawful about that is that the parameters are not equally applied. That's number one. We need to have equal protection laws in this country, and so the parameters need to be applied equally. That's number one. Number two is the parameters themselves are too strict. They essentially prohibit the operation of interstate buses because you have to hit. So the parameters that the city has set say you need to get approval from the commissioner. That can take 30 days. Now, keep in mind, a cross-country bus trip, if you're coming from Texas or California or Arizona or Florida, that's a full day on a bus. I mean, that's 24, 26 hours in a bus. And being able to move that amount of people, a bus full, safely across the country is very difficult. And it does not work on a 30-day time schedule where that bus would need to it's actually 32 days, 32 days in advance of your drop-off window. You need to apply for permission. Then the city can take 30 full days and either tell you, yes, you can come or no, you can't. And that decision's in the sole discretion of the commissioner of the Department of Transportation. And then let's assume you do wait your full 30 days, you get your permission. Now you can start your 24-hour trek. And you need to meet a drop-off window that's an hour big. There are sometimes I have trouble meeting an hour window to get to the airport. And these folks are coming from across country, so you have to hit that 1 hour time window or you violated the ordinance. And you can only drop off in one designated place, which also makes it very difficult. And I think lends itself to traffic congestion, doesn't prevent it, but I suppose reasonable folks can differ. But the answer to your question of, hey, bus company, isn't this just a reasonable response? I mean, the city's got a responsibility here. And the answer is no, it's not. It's not, because number one, it's not equally applied. And number two, these parameters are so strict that it essentially prohibits any realistic interstate bus operation.
Well, it's interesting that coming from the perspective of equal protection under the law, shouldn't that also be applied to the people who are putting these people on buses and sending them into these kinds of conditions? Because if you say that it is not being applied equally, there is only one source that are transporting this group of people who are coming, from other countries seeking asylum, and you have a governor who has said that we're going to just ship these people without any notice or any cooperations with those governments. And don't those governments have to employ a set of standards to protect its citizens and to provide for the people that the governor from another state saying, we're not going to apprise you of anything that we're doing?
So what I can tell you about the clients that I represent, and I realize I don't represent every bus company under the sun, but the clients that I represent, every single passenger expressed a desire to come to Chicago or wherever their destination is. Nobody's being shipped. Nobody's being misled. So this is people coming across the border and saying, I want to go to Chicago, or I have family in Chicago, or I want to go to Indianapolis. How close to Indianapolis can you get me? I want to go to New York. And our company raises its hand and says, we'll take you there. And so that's an important distinction. I just want to be clear, for my clients. The other point is not all these passengers are similarly situated, right? I mean, we talk about them we talk about the passengers as though they're a monolith and they're one group that all have the same desires and the same needs and the same benefits and the same shortcomings or difficulties. And I don't think that's true. Each one of these folks has their own story. It's in their own reasons for wanting to come to Chicago or not. And the last thing I'll say on this is, if the city wants to take up the burden and the cost of housing folks, of providing services to them, that's the city's prerogative. It can do that. But as whether or not it has an obligation to do so, doesn't really have much to do, or really anything to do, with whether it's constitutionally regulating bus transportation, which is the only issue in the case.
Okay. Well, I think that that's going to be decided at the federal level. It's going to be very interesting
It certainly will.
to hear the arguments, and certainly how the federal court decides that case.
We are looking forward to it.
So, so your contingency is that if the federal case says it's unconstitutional, what happens if the federal courts come back and say it's not unconstitutional?
Yeah, so if the federal courts come back and say the city lawfully exercised its police power in passing this ordinance, then two things would likely happen. The first thing is the case will likely be appealed, and the Seventh Circuit, the next rung of federal courts, will weigh in. I suspect that will be the case, win or lose. I think that if the city lost, they would likely appeal. The case is just too important, I think, to not go up on appeal. So that's number one. But then at the same time, if the ordinance is found to be a constitutional exercise of the police power, then the state court cases, that the 95 state court cases, will proceed. And the individual defendants, my clients, will defend those cases based on whatever defenses they have. So, for example, the federal court case could go the city's way. That's a possibility. Ordinance is found constitutional, but then any number of defenses may apply. Like, for example, the bus company didn't violate it, or they did get approval, or any number of other factual case-specific defenses.
All right, Michael Kozlowski is handling this case, and we're going to be watching it very closely. There are residents, there are citizens that are very, very concerned about this, and they think that it is certainly unfair that the city is having to bear the burden of providing for these. Although, as you say, that there are some have different needs, but all of them that are being sent to the city of Chicago, are having to provide housing and food for them and shelter. So I guess that's the city's concern, as well as the public. And quite frankly, I think it's a reasonable concern. So it's going to be interesting to see how this case turns out. But Michael Kozlowski, thank you very much for coming by and stopping by and talking with us. And we hope that you come back and talk with us again as this moves forward.
Thanks very much, Mark.
All right, we appreciate it. Thank you so much. All right, folks. Well, you've heard what he said. And so from their position, they believe that the city does not, in a sense, have the right to put this measure in place. I happen to see it a little bit differently, because I'm not quite sure how they can argue that the city doesn't have the constitutional right to self-govern or to put laws in place to address concerns. That's what municipalities do, is they put these things in place to address concerns, to protect the public. So, but we'll see what the court says about this case. But there are 95 cases. There are 38 different defendants in this case, and so it's going to be quite interesting. I was supposed to have some clips for you guys, but unfortunately, my producer has just texted me and said that he was having some technical issues himself, so I don't have those clips from things that happened over the weekend, so I won't be able to show you the clips. But it's going to be. I think it's going to be a contentious situation, and these bus companies, I think, and I have suggested and argued that I believe that the Attorney General has powers to that can be put into place for the state as a whole in terms of people being trafficked across state lines. So I believe that there are some issues there. In fact, I even approached the Attorney General, Kwame Raoul, back in January when I saw him at the mayor's interfaith breakfast, which, he said that he couldn't discuss it, which I understand he can't discuss the details, but I certainly believe, but he did say that they were looking at different they're looking at different scenarios, and they're looking at different things. But I certainly think that there is something that the Attorney General can do to mitigate this situation. And I think that it is far-fetched to believe that a governor in another state can impose any kind of actions on another state and other municipalities, and those states and those municipalities don't have the constitutional right and responsibility, from my view, to put things in place to protect the people of their state. So if the courts rule that the city does not have the right to do that, I would be stunned that that the federal courts will take that position. But we shall see what happens. All right. So next, I want to remind you again, coming up this Saturday will be our first legal hour with Judge Leonard Murray, who's going to be answering your legal questions. Now, let me make it clear that he cannot give you legal advice. He can answer legal questions, but he cannot give you individual legal advice. So that's not going to happen. So the way that this will happen is you will have your questions. You will put your questions in the chat. I will read the questions off out loud to Judge Murray, and he will respond to your questions. Now, you can also email me your questions that you have, and I will ask you not to give a big narrative, but maybe give a little background, and then ask your question. So you can send it to me. You can pre-send them. You can start sending them to me now, and you can send them to my email at I'm going to have you to send them to a separate email so that we keep them separate. So send them to and I'll put it in the chat, markjwus@gmail.com. Send your legal questions there and put in the captions for the legal hour, and then that way I will be able to leading up to Saturday to be able to separate those out so that we could have those questions. And of course, it's going to be on a first come, first serve. So we're going to do that for 1 hour every Saturday going forth with Judge Leonard Murray, who will be answering your legal questions. And it's going to be called the People's Show Legal Hour with Judge Leonard Murray here every Saturday at 1 o'clock. So tell your friends to tune in. It'll be right here on Facebook Live and on all of my social media outlets, Instagram, Twitter, or X, formerly known as Twitter. And we'll be streaming live here every Saturday. Well, there are some other things that are going on, a lot of other things that are going on. So we're going to get into them, but I want to talk about that. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. But what I do want to talk about is I want to talk about this judicial race, and we're going to be talking about it in the 8 o'clock hour. I am going to be talking more about what's happening at the Board of Review and how that impacts us, because, this is another one of those, obscure offices, but it absolutely has a critical impact on all of us as property owners. So we're going to be talking about that, and I'm going to be telling you why it is important that we make a different decision. I know that some of us hadn't paid attention to it, but there's some things that just recently happened that we're going to discuss in detail, and I'm going to lay it out for you so that you can understand how this is impacting all of our lives. So last week, covering some of our news, the governor introduced his $52.7 billion budget. $52.7 billion budget was introduced last week. And of course, the governor came out and said that there's about an $800 or $900 million shortfall. I have no understanding of that. No understanding of how in the world that we have an $800 or $900,000 or $800 $900 million shortfall in a $52.7 billion budget when we are getting $18 billion through the Infrastructure Act, $39 billion through the Chips and Science Act, and then we're getting another $9 billion through the Climate Act. So there are billions of dollars coming to the state of Illinois to expand and to create all kinds of opportunities that we must be paying attention to, and certainly making sure that our communities don't get passed by. And so when the governor said that he's going to have an $800 or $900 million shortfall in the upcoming budget, you know what that means. That means that they're going to be looking for ways to fine and fee and charge to the people who are already challenged the most. They don't want to allow for wealthier people who should be paying more and certainly paying their fair share. He's not going to be supportive of that. He's already said that he's not in support of the financial transaction tax. I don't know why, other than, he himself is a very wealthy person and he wants to protect his wealthy friends. And I contend that if they want to threaten to leave, which will probably never happen, not likely to happen because of all sorts of infrastructural concerns in terms of moving the trade indices to another place, because proximity matters in terms of having the speed to be able to make trades and to compete. So you can't just pick up and go to some place like Iowa or Missouri, some place like that does not have the kind of infrastructure that the city of Chicago, a place like the city of Chicago, has. So it's not likely that they would be going anywhere. And all they're being asked is to pay a half cent or something of that, a fraction of that on certain trades, not on every trade, but on certain trades that could generate hundreds of millions of dollars. It's not going to change the lifestyle of people who are already wealthy. And I think that Brandon Johnson needs to push that. But I think that we, as the general public, need to put pressure on the governor to say to the governor, regardless of what you think, this is what we, as the people of Illinois, think. And if you don't impose or support this transaction tax for wealthy people to pay a little bit of the hundreds of millions of dollars and the billions of trades that are being generated and the hundreds of millions of dollars that they are earning and generating, if they're not willing to give a little bit and pay a little bit, they pay no taxes whatsoever, zero taxes whatsoever on any trades whatsoever. There are other countries that are doing it. It's working successfully in other countries. And by the way, even the indices here, they pay a transaction tax in order for them to even operate the trades. So they're already paying it in terms of having the ability to operate those different indices. So this is not something that is new or foreign. They just don't want to pay it to help the state. They think that the state is supposed to help them, just like Reinsdorf went to the General Assembly and asking the General Assembly to contribute $1 billion to a private entity that is already very wealthy. They own the Bulls, they own the White Sox, and they want for the people, for the public, to contribute $1 billion to build a private stadium that you have to pay hundreds of dollars in cost to go to a game and buy, beer that you have to pay $10 for a glass of beer and $12 for a hot dog. I think that's a bit of an insult that we should be subsidizing wealthy people who already have the money. It's a private industry. Now, I heard the governor today who said that he is not in favor of using public dollars to subsidize a private business like the Chicago White Sox and stadiums and other areas around the country where they have privately funded their own new stadiums, and that the White Sox should be able to do it itself. On top of the fact, where they're talking about putting it is on the Project 78 land, which has already received a $1.2 billion TIF already. That was a part of the $2.4 billion TIF that was given between Project 78 and Lincoln's Yard. Lincoln's Yard is to the north. And they did that in record speed overnight. That is when Lori Lightfoot actually got elected and came into office. It started under Rahm, but I believe it was one of the first things that she did was to sign off or pass that the city council passed that $2.4 billion TIF for Project 78 and Lincoln Yards. And now they want to ask us to give another $1 billion to support rich people in building another stadium. Why do they want to move from where they are now? Now, I contend that they think that if they move just a little bit north, that they will get more white folks to buy tickets to go to the game, because white folks don't want to come on the south side through all these black people. I'm just telling it like it is, to go to a game when they've been going to the south side, over 100 years now. And I haven't heard of any real trouble with people who are taking the train to come and commute to the south side of Chicago to go watch the Chicago White Sox. Hey, I'm a baseball fan, and I used to go to see the White Sox right there at White Sox Park. I think they should stay right where they are and improve that part. But even if they want to move, if you want to move to a new house, then you build your own house. Why should the state be subsidizing that? What is the state going to get from that? unless it's going to be a guaranteed loan. Now, it's going to be a guaranteed loan that the state is going to get paid back and the state's going to earn some interest. That might be something to consider, but that was not what the proposal was, or certainly that was not what was told to us that the proposal is. It told to us that the proposal is that they went to ask for $1 billion in tax subsidies. And we should be, by the thousands, rejecting that proposal and sending a message to the governor that will doom any reelection that he would be considering if he was to support that, and anybody in the General Assembly that supported that. We will target them in the next election cycle. That's why it's important that we have to organize ourselves because of things like that, that you and I and the people who are hit the hardest, the people who are working the hardest for less and getting the least, will have to pay more to subsidize a park for which they can't even afford to go to. This is not what we should be doing. This is not what we should be doing, and that's not what government is for. Government's responsibility is to do two things. One is to make sure that we're safe, and two is to help people who need the help the most. Chicago White Sox and Reinsdorf don't need subsidies. They don't need tax cuts. They don't need tax breaks. They're doing extraordinarily well. The people who need the break are the people who are not getting them. And which takes me into this next thing that I have alluded to a couple of weeks ago. I had a candidate on, Larisha Tucker, who is running for the Board of Review. Now, the Board of Review, most people have no idea what the Board of Review is, what the Board of Review does, or even where it is. No, most people don't. And what the Board of Review does, the Board of Review reviews appeals that property owners have appealed their taxes and have lost the appeal. They appeal to the assessor. The assessor's office has a process by which they review to make sure that the property values are in line with what they should be, and that the assessed valuations are in line and the tax rates are in line. And then they look at that and they see if in fact there's something that has been misapplied, and they make the adjustments. But they also look at it and say, no, this is not misapplied, and what you're asking for is out of balance. And so the assessor office says no to that appeal. Well, they can go to the Board of Review. For the Board of Review, it's like an appeal. Like you lose a case in at the lower court, then you can go to the appellate court. In this case, if you lose at the assessor's office, then you can go to the Board of Review. And the Board of Review has a process by which they analyze all of that same information. And then you have three commissioners. You have three commissioners. And there are three commissioners, Samantha Steele, Larry Rogers Jr., and George Cardenas. Those are the three commissioners on the Board of Review for districts 1, 2, and 3. and the commissioners will vote to override the assessor's decision. And so, for example, what just happened is that Larry Rogers Jr. just received a contribution to the tune of $75,000 from the Chicago Bears. The Chicago Bears just purchased the Arlington racetrack, and they paid $194 million for it. They paid $194 million for it, tore it down, demolished it, because they were supposed to be building a new stadium. Now, the Chicago Bears are appealing their taxes and asking for the value of the Arlington racetrack to be assessed and reassessed at a lower value. They're asking for it to be $100 million. They just paid $194 million. There is an analyst group that says that that parcel of land, even with it being demolished, should not be valued at anything less than $160 million. The Board of Review, Larry Rogers Jr., George Cardenas, are being asked by the Chicago Bears. Matter of fact, Larry Rogers Jr. really should recuse himself from this because he's compromised. And nobody's giving you $75,000 just because they think you're good looking or they like you. They're giving you $75,000 because they expect something for that. And mind you, he has received more than $800,000 over, I believe it's been the last 10 years. I'll have to get my research out to make sure that I'm accurate about that. But he's received more than $800,000 from appeal attorneys, tax appeal attorneys, to his war chest. And he has voted to shift more than $500 million in taxes onto the rest of us, the other 800,000 people in the district, who we have to make up those taxes. So when you see that your taxes have increased, it's not always coming from the tax assessors or from the to cover the budgets or the levies in that particular area. It is because of the Board of Review that has given tax cuts to wealthy commercial property owners to reduce their taxes. For instance, you take Trump Tower. They go in and Ed Burke is hired by the Trump company. They hire Ed Burke. Ed Burke puts in an appeal, loses that appeal, then goes to the Board of Review. In effect, they hire Larry Rogers Jr. and George Cardenas, and they go before them and they put forth their appeal, and they get granted that appeal from the Board of Review. The Board of Review has given Donald Trump millions and millions of dollars of tax cuts, who says that the building is worth less. And here's a person who always brags and so certainly overinflates the value because he says he has such great properties, but only when it comes to paying your taxes, they're not such great properties. They get a tax cut. That tax burden doesn't go into the trash can. That tax burden gets put on the rest of us and it's spread out over the other 800,000 property owners where we have to foot that bill. It is akin to you paying for someone else to go to Gibson's or the Chop House or Maestro's or whatever fancy steak restaurant there is downtown. They go to get the nice juicy steak dinner. You stay home and you send your credit card to pay for their steak dinner, while they still have the benefit of their property. So you subsidize their taxes, wealthy people taxes, at the hands of someone like Larry Rogers Jr., who I used to support many years ago, but who has become a corrupt, layover from the Barrios regime. That's who Larry Rogers Jr. is, and that's what he's doing. Never mind the fact that he's going around. Sometimes he probably does one or two every now and then. He goes around and he has these town hall meetings that he's quote unquote showing people how to appeal their taxes. So he shows you how to appeal your taxes. You go appeal your taxes. You may get a couple $100 reduction in your taxes. And you are all wonderful and you feel great and you think that Larry Rogers Jr. has done you a great service. But what you don't know is that Larry Rogers Jr., while he's, helping you get a couple $100 tax reduction, he's just setting you up so that you could pay on average of $700 in subsidies to cover tax cuts for wealthy property owners like Trump Tower, like places like Willis Tower and other very wealthy properties, or what's getting ready to happen with the Bears' new property that they purchased out in Arlington, that we don't even think, or certainly there's discussion that they're not even going to go out there, that they won't even be building out there. But never mind that. Even if they did build out there, why should ordinary property owners, you and I, why should we subsidize their taxes? This is essentially what is happening. He's done it on the north side and he's done it on the south side. Let me just pull up some of the research that I found as to when I looked into this, and I wish I could put it up, but I'm gonna let me just pull this up. What I found, I went on and you can go on the Cook County Assessor's page and you can look for their data dashboard, and it could just show you in the different districts how much that we have subsidized the taxes for wealthy property owners, and how much that residential tax cuts have been let, as opposed to commercial property owners. So the commercial property owners don't subsidize taxes for us, but we're subsidizing taxes for people who have properties that are worth $100 million, $200 million, $300 million, and then they go in and get them assessed at half that value so that they don't have to pay those taxes. But when they get ready to sell, they sell at the actual value of what the property is worth. But you and I have paid part of their taxes so that they can increase their profits. We're subsidizing their taxes and subsidizing their profits. This is all happening because of people at the Board of Review like Larry Rogers Jr. And so I am saying, Larry Rogers Jr., it is time for him to be replaced. He is not a friend to the community. He's certainly not a friend to the Black community. He's certainly not a friend to the Southland. About 8 years ago, 9 years ago, I had people from Country Club Hills, when I was running the real estate division over at Rainbow Push, which was people could come in and they could get some counseling because people were having problems with their mortgages, and we were trying to work to put together programs so that people can get modifications on their mortgage. There were about 150 people that had come to Rainbow Push because of the Walmart $80 million tax abatement that was given to them by the Board of Review, Larry Rogers Jr., George Cardenas, and I forget the person that's been replaced. Samantha Steele replaced her. So we need to replace one more person to right this ship. And that person is Larry Rogers Jr. Larry Rogers Jr. has made millions and millions of dollars. These attorneys have given them cases in terms of their personal injury law firms. So Larry Rogers Jr. is doing quite well, extraordinarily well. And he is the bidder on behalf of these rich property owners. And we've got to understand that. We've got to understand exactly what's happening. If you are a property owner, all you have to do is look at your tax bill. You got special assessments on there. You have your regular taxes that you have to pay in the levy for schools and roads and all of those things in your tax rate. But you also have these special assessments that you are subsidizing wealthy property owners that is being shifted on us. I'm trying to find that information that let me see where I can where I put. I'm going to have to rename it so that I could easily get to it. Let's see. Here it is. Here. I think this is. Okay. Okay. All right. So here's an example of what was done in the reassessment of Chicago in 2021. The Board of Review shifted 7 percentage points of the city of Chicago's $8 billion total levy burden onto homeowners. The way that this was done was mainly by cutting the values on the largest properties in the city, meaning commercial property owners, most of them downtown, which was more than $500 million a year, which was spread across 800,000 homes. So that's your home, my home, and others. $500 million a year spread across 800,000 homes. If you divide that $500 million by 800 homes, you paid an additional $700, which was added to your property tax bill for the year of 2021 going forward. He did the same thing in the north suburbs in 2022. These are actual facts. You can find this information on the Cook County Assessor's page, or just Google it. In 2022, you can see the same situation. For example, in the Layden Township, which is a northern suburbs, they cut $300 million from commercial properties, the average value, But that's for commercial properties. They cut $300 million in tax responsibilities, but they only gave the residential homeowners a $10 million cut. That's a 30-1, which again, that's 7 percentage points of the tax burden that they shifted on to the homeowners. All of those homeowners in those areas spiked their property taxes across the township, while the tax bills of the largest properties like Microsoft Data Center, a huge logistics center, which is owned by the Apollo private equity firm, and a big apartment complexes. They shifted $300 million of those wealthy companies and property owners onto homeowners. This is all because of the people at the Board of Review. And I am going to continue, and we're going to continue to put this information out because they've been flying under the radar for decades and passing the buck off to the assessor's office. Because whenever your taxes go up, the first place you look is to the assessor's office, and you think that it's the assessor's office. Now, the assessor's office used to work in tandem with the Board of Review because you had a corrupt assessor with Barrios, and the Board of Review, which worked in tandem. So now you have Fritz Kagi, who is trying to implement a more fair process. And of course, he's having problems with changing the law because you have to go to the General Assembly for many of these law changes and get the General Assembly to change these laws in order for him to change the way that things are assessed. What does that mean? What it means is that in our communities who are already challenged with services and the lack of public safety, the lack of investment, blighted properties all over, vacant properties sitting there, which is another problem I'm going to get to. $500 million a year that's going out of our communities to subsidize rich people's tax burdens. $500 million a year. And largely because of one person who receives thousands and thousands of dollars in campaign contributions from these companies to be their bidder and throw that burden onto us. Well, we found it out, and we're passing that information on. And when you go to the polls on March 19th, or if you're going to early vote, if you send Larry Rogers Jr. back to the Board of Review, you're essentially saying to yourself, it is okay for Larry Rogers Jr. to pass on to me the burden of paying and subsidizing the taxes for wealthy property owners. Give them the tax cuts, we'll pay the bill. Send them to the steak restaurant, we'll pay the bill. We'll foot the bill. That's essentially what you will be saying if you're supporting and voting for Larry Rogers Jr. again, I used to be a strong supporter. There was one time back in the early 2000s that I had a conversation with Larry Rogers Jr. about running for mayor. He was reluctant to do it, and I found out some reasons why he was reluctant to do it. Didn't want certain things exposed. But I don't think at that time, because, I think he had just recently gotten elected to the Board of Review. But he has become more institutionalized in that regime, and he's one of the last holdovers of the Barrios regime. We can't send him back to that office. He's compromised, and he's compromising our communities. And just because somebody looks like us doesn't mean they are for us. We may share skin color, but they're not our kin. That's what's happening with Larry Rogers. The facts are there. It's irrefutable. The facts are there. Look at your tax bills. That's why you are paying more and more in property taxes. There are people who had to walk away from their homes in Country Club Hills because they could not pay the $10,000 to $20,000 a year in special assessments to subsidize for Walmart. And Walmart, what they do is when the tax abatement runs out, you know what they do? They close up shop and they move, they leave. They've taken the subsidies, they've gotten all of their profits, and they fold up their tent and they leave us holding the bag because of people like Larry Rogers Jr. This is what he has gotten rich off of. He hasn't gotten rich from his contributions. The way that he's gotten rich is that these same people funnel cases to their law firms, personal injury cases, other cases that they represent, and they've done quite well. Good for them. Good for them. But it should not be at the expense that they're throwing this burden onto our communities. Another problem that Fritz Kagi is dealing with, that's been longstanding, that's been a burden in our communities, where we see all of these boarded vacant buildings. One of the reasons is because up until now, people who purchase these buildings and leave them vacant, there was a policy in place where they could get up to 90% in tax reductions, 90% in tax reductions, and that was unlimited. Now that is being changed, where the assessor is reducing that from being unlimited to a certain period of time, which will force the property owners to either fix the properties, sell the properties, or fix the properties and get them rented so that they can generate the income. And so what this will do is it will help to alleviate some of the blight that we see. Now, I'm from the South Shore area, and two of the toughest areas in South Shore is 79th Street from Yates over to Exchange, where we have these buildings. Now, there are some investments happening there. I was just at the Urban Lux Cafe last night at their storytelling time. It was very nice. I was invited to be there by Cy Lewis. Thank you very much, Cy, for inviting me to come there to talk about the 10 by 10 to win and tell a story. And I felt somewhat of ashamed that I hadn't been there, but we're going to go back there. They have great food. They certainly have great tea. And it is a fabulous, fabulous little quaint place. So go there and support them. I think they're open on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. They open at like 3 or 4 o'clock. And but it's called the Urban Lux Cafe. But there's still a lot of blight in the area. There's a lot of suffering in the area on that commercial corridor. Much of because property owners, people that bought these properties, and they just let them remain vacant, and which causes for the values of other properties to go down and for the community to go down, and invites all kinds of negative activity. And so what the assessor is doing is trying to right that by taking away the unlimited tax abatement of 90% of their taxes and saying that you are no longer going to have an unlimited availability of not paying your taxes. You've got to fix these properties because that is going to expire, and you're going to have to pay the fair assessed valuation equal to those properties so that you pay your fair share of real estate taxes, that you're going to pay the full ride. Now, some people think, well, they'll just walk away from the property. Well, that may be, but that will create an opportunity for somebody else to get the property. And we need to provide subsidies for improving these properties, which I'm for that sort of thing, because we're putting these properties back in play, putting them back to use where we could provide more housing. We certainly need more housing. There's been a tremendous shortage of housing being built across this country, where we were building 20 million homes. We're down to 10 million housing units, which has caused for the cost of rent to skyrocket, because there's a bigger demand and we have too few housing units. So we certainly need to build more housing units. So we've got to right this ship, and that's only going to happen with us as the voters. That's why it is so important for us to organize ourselves, so not only that we have the power to determine elections, but that we also have a infrastructure in place where we have eyes and ears in all of these areas of importance, that we could bring them back to a central place, discuss them, learn about them, and then we can address them. That is the purpose of building the block, so that we're expanding the tent. And as we expand the tent of voters, that means we're also bringing in the people who have the information that from all these different areas that we need to know about, so that we can address these issues. These are the types of systemic inequities that cause for our communities to suffer from the divestitures, the disinvestment, and then the overproliferation of taxing us on top of our taxes. That's why we have got to be informed about this information. I know that I will continue to work hard to get this information, to study this information, to understand this information, and to bring it to you, so that we can be informed as a body, and we can make the kinds of appeals and the kinds of attention that we have to to give to these things, and to get rid of people who are working antithetical to what is good for our communities. And those people who look like us, we have to deal with those people. We have to deal with those people, and we have to rid ourselves of people who are working in opposition to the improvement and the elevating and the strengthening of our communities for their own personal benefit. Larry Rogers Jr. is one of those persons. It is time for us to make a change. Again, if you send Larry Rogers Jr., if you vote for Larry Rogers Jr. in this election, you are basically saying that I am okay with paying a tax on top of a tax for my real estate taxes to subsidize wealthy property owners. That is essentially what it is. That's essentially what it is. I want to give you some more examples of what we found. With this. So I want you to go to, maybe you got a separate computer. And if not, I want you to go to, let me pull it up. Okay, so I want you to go to the cookcountyassessors.com/data-dashboard 2022. And when you go there, this is what you will see. It will show you the townships for 2022, and it will show you the tax, the tax tables, and it will show you the reductions that non-residential, which were commercial properties, and for residential. In 2021, $11.8 billion in residential, $15.3 billion in 2022. Yeah, $15.3 billion that was shifted onto homeowners. This is how much wealthy commercial property owners paid in 2021. $6.8 billion. In 2022, $9.4 billion. Right? So what they certified was $15 billion for the residential that paid, and $7.6 billion for the commercial owners. That shows you how they're shifting the burden from the commercial owners onto the residential homeowners. Go to the website. You can look at the tables. They're all there. They're all there. And you can see the pattern. You can see it's in black and white. In this case, it's in blue and yellow, or blue and gold. You can see what is happening to our communities. And this is just one layer. This is one layer of how government is not working for us, or people in government is using government to work against us. How in the world can our communities move ahead when every time that we think that we're making a couple of steps forward, we find out that somebody is taking it from us on the other side? And it's somebody who looks like us, but they certainly don't live in our communities. Larry Rogers Jr. doesn't live in our communities. And even if he did, doesn't really care about them, obviously. And yes, I've sent an invitation. I've tried to reach out to Larry Rogers Jr.'s people to get him on the program. I had Larissa Tucker, who is his opponent, who is an assessor out in the southern suburbs, who is running for commissioner, board of review. I think we need to support her, get her elected. She is vowed not to take a single dollar in campaign contributions from tax appeal attorneys. And I don't think that anybody on the board of review should be taking contributions from tax appeal attorneys, period. On cases that you are going to have to vote on that those same attorneys are bringing forth. It's obvious what that is all about. Larry Rogers Jr. will say, well, you know, all of the contributions that we're receiving are well within the guidelines of the law. Of course they are. But that's not the point. The point is the principle of you're taking money, you're being paid off to vote, to give tax cuts, and to put them on the homeowners on the south side of Chicago and in the southern suburbs, because that's largely where the district goes all the way out. The highest levied or the highest assessed suburban or municipality in the state of Illinois is Park Forest. The highest. Dalton is catching right up. So the taxes levies are already high, and then Larry Rogers Jr. put the subsidies or the tax cuts on top of that, which makes them even higher. So I want you to certainly keep this in mind, study it, understand it. I'm going to be talking about it a great deal leading up to the elections because we have to make a different choice. We've got to protect our investments. We got to protect our communities. We have to stop subsidizing wealthy people. Imagine this: working class people and the working poor are subsidizing people who don't need the help. We've got to change if we want to see change. We've got to do something different. If we want to see something that we haven't seen, then that means we've got to do things that we haven't done. The one thing that we have not done is we have not organized ourselves together. That is why I continue to push, and we're starting to grow. And we're going around and having conversations with small groups and explaining why it's important that the masses of us must come together. We should not be controlled or dictated to by the Democratic Party. I am not saying that we should be abandoning the Democratic Party, but what we should be doing is we should be instructing the Democratic Party and not the other way around. And so it is the best group that we have available to work with, but we've got to make it work for us and not allow for other people to make it work for their special interest. So this is what I am saying, is that we've got to organize an independent Black voting bloc so that we can have eyes and ears in all of these areas of concern in all of our communities where we live, in the city of Chicago, in the southern suburbs, the west suburbs, where we live. We have more than 1 million registered Black people in Cook County proper, over 600,000 in Chicago alone. Another 120 or 130,000 young people who are now eligible to be registered to vote. That is enormous power if we organize. And it has to happen through the masses of people, not through an individual, because it's not going to be any individual person or personality that is going to be the savior or the liberator of our people. That's going to happen with us working together, organizing ourselves together to do this. We can't operate in these silos. It can only get us in trouble, or keep us in trouble. I shouldn't say get us in trouble, keep us in trouble. And you hear me say all the time, individualism is a toxic cancer. We can't be fractionized and allowing for them to continue to fractionize us, because that's a weapon that they use to keep us separated, so that we're going all over the place, so that they stay in power and they're not held accountable. That's why unions are so strong. And I always point to unions because they are so strong. And the reason why unions are so strong, for one reason, they're united. That's why they're called unions. They're united. We need to have our own independent voting bloc, our own independent union of Black voters. Now, we are not anti any group. That's not what this is about. We are simply saying that we are pro our communities, and we are taking a different position to make sure that our communities are protected and provided for, as every other community is. There's not a single poor white community in Chicago. Not one. As well, there should not be. There is not a single poor white community in Chicago. And there should not be a single poor Black community in Chicago. And we can make that happen. The time is now. And the reason that the time is now is because the resources are coming. And we can't take this approach that I've got mine, let other people get theirs. We cannot take that approach. We can't afford it. Individualism is a toxic cancer for our communities. Why? Because our numbers universally are too small for us to operate that way. We've got to take the attitude that our success is based on the masses. And there is one quote that Stokely Carmichael, who changed his name and became Kwame Ture, used to always say, and I want to repeat it because that's where we have to be. He says that no Black person in this country makes any advancement solely based on his or her talent or worth. All individual advancement is based on mass struggle. We make no progress in this world without shedding our blood. Therefore, brothers and sisters, your advancement and success does not belong to you. It belongs to the people. And if you do not use your success or advancement for the benefit of your people, it is a betrayal of the people who shed their blood for you. Stokely Carmichael. That is his quote. And I tend to repeat it every now and then to myself and to us, that we are interdependent upon each other, and we are interdependent or interresponsible for each other and for those who are struggling. When we bring ourselves together, we cannot be defeated. We cannot take the attitude that we cannot do this. We have to. We have to take the responsibility and make the commitment that we have to do it together if we're going to bring about the changes that we need and that we want and that we desire for our communities. Listen, I want to thank you all for being here with me tonight. Charles will be back with me next Monday night. Hope all is well with him. I want to thank Circuit Court Judge Leonard Murray for being with us. I want to thank Attorney Michael Kozlowski, who is representing the bus companies in that challenge with the city of Chicago. I want to thank him for being with us. And I certainly want to thank you, the audience, for being with us. Make sure that you tune in Saturday at 1 o'clock right back here for the People's Show Legal Hour with Judge Leonard Murray on Saturday at 1 o'clock.